So now let's just look at what is NLP. What's the definition of NLP first of all? Well, NLP stands for Neuro-Linguistic Programming. So neuro is the study of the nervous system and the mind. So it's how we think, through which our experiences are processed via our five senses, which is visual, auditory, kinesthetic, which is feeling, olfactory, which is smell, and gustatory, which is taste. And so this experience that we have, everything that happens to us, all of our experiences actually happen inside of our own neurology. So even to the extent that, we might have a shared experience with somebody else, that still happens inside of our own neurology. Next, we've got language. And so linguistic is the study of language and other non-verbal communication through which our neural representations are coded, ordered, and given meaning. And this includes pictures, sounds, feelings, tastes, smells, and the words that we use, our self-talk. So it's our language and how do we use it. Programming then is the ability to discover and to utilize the programs that we run in our neurological systems to achieve our specific and desired outcomes. So how do we communicate with ourselves? Or the sequence of our actions and how we can motivate ourselves. So in other words, NLP is how do we use the language of the mind to consistently achieve our specific and desired outcomes. NLP then really is a study of excellence, in discovering excellence and being able to utilize it in such a way that we can create change in ourselves and others. And it begins with this attitude of curiosity and a willingness to experiment. We have this curiosity and this willingness for experimentation, and we create these results through modeling this excellence of people who are most excellent in their fields. Now, NLP is a do-with process and not a do-to process. Often people ask, they say, make me stop smoking, or make me lose weight, or do this to me. Now, as an NLP practitioner, or as a coach, or as a hypnotherapist, whatever modality you're doing and using, we wield no power over the client. At the end of the day, it's the client's decision to take whatever change, whatever actions, whatever their goal is and what they want to achieve. They physically need to take the action to achieve that. We simply a way of helping the client to be able to achieve that success that they want. NLP has also been described as an attitude and a methodology that leaves behind a trail of techniques, and the study of subjective experience and how it affects our behavior. And this comes back to this idea of we have an experience that happens outside of us, and yet we have it inside, we interpret it inside our own neurology. And of course, the realization that the words that we use do not describe the world that we live in, but rather actually determine the world that we live in. NLP was created by John Grinder and Richard Bandler. And so around 1975, Richard Bandler was a student at California University in Santa Cruz, and John Grinder was a linguistics professor there. Now, Bandler was editing a book by Fritz Perls, who was the creator of Gestalt therapy, and Richard found that he was actually quite good at doing Gestalt therapy, and he found that he had the specific gift in modeling. And so modeling is being able to actually take what works that someone else is doing and to be then doing it for yourself. So this is where this notion of NLP being a attitude and a methodology that leaves behind a trail of techniques comes from. The idea of actually being able to look and see what excellent behavior is that somebody else might be doing, and being able to learn that excellent behavior and being able to install that in ourselves. And so it's this desire to really find out how is that person doing the thing that they're doing. And so in modeling people that are excellent in behavior, we're looking for what are their strategies, what are their values, their beliefs, their physiology, all the things. what is it that really makes them be able to do that? And then separating what is necessary from what is idiosyncratic in creating that behavior. So what's necessary to create that behavior, and what are the things that they do that don't actually contribute to creating that behavior? So you can actually learn how to do modeling. In fact, during Master Practitioner, we actually teach you how to do modeling, and you're going to do a modeling exercise. So you learn how to be able to model excellent behavior, how to install that in yourself, and also then how do you train other people so that they can create those same results. And the best of all is all of that happens in much less time than it took the original person to learn that excellent behavior in the first place. Now, the three major people that were modeled by Bandler and Grinder in the early days were Milton Erickson, Virginia Satir, and Fritz Perls. So NLP actually has quite a respectable body of knowledge, and it has its background in a number of intellectual disciplines. And I believe the field of NLP is simply going to grow in the future as leaders start to model and recreate excellence in other modalities from experts in those fields so that they can add it to the existing techniques taught within NLP. So that's all well and good, but what is NLP useful for? Well, plainly, NLP is actually useful in all areas of our lives, from business to therapy to education to our own personal lives, helping to empower ourselves and other people that we interact with. As an example, the NLP communication model helps us to understand how we create our own internal representations, how we hold that internal representation in our head, which makes a difference in how we produce our state, our physiology, and ultimately our behavior, which of course impacts on our performance. With the keys to achievable outcome and well-formedness conditions helps us to know our outcomes. What is our goal? How are we going to achieve that goal? So what do we need to do? Being able to build rapport is an invaluable skill in therapy, in business, in education, in general life. Being able to create that feeling of trust is conducive to an effective communication. Understanding other people's preferred representational systems is useful. Knowing the predicates that they use, so the types of words that you need to use as you speak to them so that they really get what it is that you mean. Have you ever heard somebody say, "I don't see what you mean," or "I don't get a feeling for that"? Well, actually, they're telling you exactly what you should be doing to explain what you're saying in a different way. The thing is, most people just don't realize it. Understanding how we say and how we can say the exact same thing in different ways so that it actually means different things to the listener. So it's really important also then to be able to say what it is we want to say in the right way to get that message across. Understanding eye patterns and what people are really doing when they move their eyes in different directions as you speak to them. What are they doing? How do they access information, and how do we need to speak to them? Submodalities are very useful in creating very quick change and results to help yourself and other people with things like minor negative states or behaviors. How about getting rid of something that, maybe the person doesn't like and they really should be liking, example, eating vegetables, because it's necessary for their health. Or somebody who eats way too much chocolates and wants to stop eating chocolates so that they can lose weight. Or help them get rid of some limiting beliefs. We've got the hierarchy of ideas, which is really useful in communication to understand, do we need to talk in big picture or more details? It's really useful utilizing it in negotiation or arbitration. The meta model is useful because it helps us to get really specific with the person that's speaking to us and understanding what are they really saying to us. Have you ever had somebody, you asked them to do something and they went and did the task, but actually it wasn't what you asked them to do, and yet they thought that they'd done that? So knowing how to get very specific, both in our own language as well as the people that we're speaking with, and understanding what do they truly mean. Metaphors, of course, stories have been useful throughout the ages. Storytelling is very powerful in getting results and also really, really useful to use with children. Anchoring to create or change your state. Example, get motivated in an instant. Feeling happy, feeling confident. Easily get rid of procrastination. Understanding strategies that people use. Say, example, what's their decision-making strategy? How does somebody decide that something is the right thing for them? Imagine being able to utilize that in sales. Understanding whether our strategies work for us or not. Imagine that you had somebody who is a compulsive buyer, and so they're buying way too much, and they might have a bit of a problem there. And they come to you and they ask, help me to stop buying things just willy-nilly. So understanding strategies are really useful. Of course, parts integration. So you've heard people say that on the one hand I want to do this, on the other hand I want to do that. And so we've got this internal conflict that are going on. And so doing parts integration reduces this incongruence at the unconscious level and helps to prevent all this energy that's being wasted within this incongruence and this internal conflict. Timeline therapy is definitely the way to go to let go of negative emotions and limiting decisions. Get rid of phobias and fears and PTSD really quickly. Get rid of anger, sadness, hurt, guilt, and all the other negative emotions. Now, these are just some of the techniques that you learn during the live training and just some of the things that NLP can help with. You see, people are getting phenomenal results using these skills in different settings in all areas of life. Whether they're teachers, parents, business owners, salespeople, psychiatrists, doctors, coaches. In fact, it doesn't matter whichever capacity you work with other people. In fact, I get a lot of doctors and psychologists that come and do the training because they're looking for additional techniques and additional methodologies that they can use to get very quick results with their clients. So these techniques taught in NLP have far-reaching benefits. So next, let's look at cause and effect and what that means to us. Right, welcome back. And in this section, let's look at the presuppositions of NLP. Now, the presuppositions of NLP are simply convenient beliefs or assumptions. They things that and beliefs that we adopt about our client. They're not necessarily true, but they certainly filter our perceptions about our clients. So by adopting certain beliefs, we can increase our results with NLP. So they aren't strictly true, but they certainly make a change in how we work with our clients. Now, we've given you a mnemonic device, respect your world. And this is a nice, easy way to remember these 14 presuppositions. So the first is respect for the other person's model of the world. And so that doesn't mean that we accept what they're doing or that we don't change it. It simply means that we respect it and then enter into it. So if the client comes to you and says something, it sounds really crazy, if you say to the client, hey man, you sound really crazy, well, that probably is not going to be the best way to approach it. Now, that's certainly not going to help you build rapport with your client or build trust with a client. So the best way to approach is actually to accept what it is that they're saying. We work from in their model of the world to help create the change that they want. The second, behavior and change are to be evaluated in terms of context and ecology. Well, in general, we want to evaluate anything that happens, whatever the client gives us, we want to evaluate that in terms of the context that it occurs in. And what that means is what's going on around the client and as well as the ecology. So what is it that the client is asking us to achieve? So for example, if the client says to you, you know what, I want more energy all of the time, do you think that might be appropriate? Possibly not. Because at 3 o'clock in the morning we should be sleeping, and having loads of energy at 3 o'clock in the morning and not sleeping is going to negatively affect the client down the line. So it's important to consider the ecology. So what will be the impact on the client, on their family, on society, and ultimately the planet if this change actually happens? And we need to consider that within context. The next presupposition is resistance in a client is a sign of lack of rapport. There are no resistant clients, only inflexible communicators. And effective communicators accept and utilize all communication presented to them. So we want to create a safe space for our client where they can feel comfortable and free of judgment so that they're able to talk. Building rapport will actually give us that. When we find that maybe there's a situation where that is not happening, this trust is not there, or we're not able to communicate effectively, then probably there's not rapport. And we're actually going to look at how do we build rapport later on. The next presupposition is people are not their behaviors. So we want to accept the person and we want to change the behavior. You see, this is very important because what it allows us to accept is the person and change the behavior. Because you are not your behavior. See everybody as magnificent and help them in actualizing that magnificence. You see, you're clearly more than your behavior. In fact, whatever behavior you think that you are, you know that you are more than that, don't you? You know, if you ask people on the street, who are you? A lot of them are actually going to tell you what their behavior is. They'll say, I'm a lawyer, I'm an artist, I'm a banker, I'm a housewife, I'm a hypnotherapist. But that simply is just the behavior. You see, it's not who you are per se. Similarly, think of a child that does something naughty. So the child screws up. We don't say the child is a screw-up. We separate the child from the behavior. And we say, okay, you know what? That particular behavior was not what we're looking for. So how do we change that behavior? Accepting the person and changing the behavior. The next presupposition, everybody is doing the best that they can with the resources they have available. And every behavior is geared for adaptation. And the present behavior is the best choice available. So every behavior is motivated behind a positive intent. You know, even when it's not positive for us, the person who's doing that behavior is doing it because they have an intention to do or to achieve something. However, it may not be positive for the person to whom that's being done. This also means that you can forgive other people and forgive yourself. So this is like the NLP equivalent of forgiveness, because we're only doing the best that we can with the resources that we have available. Then number 6, we want to calibrate on behavior. The most important information about a person is that person's behavior. People are very easy to pay lip service. It's very easy to say, I want to do something, but not to do it. So people say one thing and do something totally different. And we want to calibrate on the behavior, on what they're actually doing. So next we've got the map is not the territory. The words we use are not the event or the item that they represent. Everyone has a different meaning for a certain word. If I was to talk about what the word picnic means, and we do this during the training, then that means something totally different for each person. You know, if I asked 15 people, what does the word picnic mean, and what's the first thing that comes up when you think of the word picnic, you can get 15 different answers. Remember that as we take information in, we delete, we generalize, and we distort based on our own internal filters, and so we create our own internal representation. And so if we then go ahead and we use language to try and describe a particular thing, we're only doing that from within inside our own neurology. And so that word that we're using isn't the map at all. It's simply a description we're giving, but it can never totally represent the experience itself. And so each of us will have different words that we use within our structure or our thinking. And so that's what the map is not the territory means. So for my clients, I'm going to use words that produce the most results in them, and those words may not be the same words that I would use for another client or even for myself. Next one, you're in charge of your mind and therefore your results. I'm also in charge of my mind and therefore my results. What this means is that if I can structure my thinking so that I hold a positive outcome, a positive representation in my mind, if I can totally focus on what I want to have happen, then I can produce those kind of results. We all as human beings are in charge of our own state. Everything we do is dependent on that internal representation and that state and that physiology that we discussed during the communication model. So who's driving your bus? We are in charge of our own thinking and therefore in charge of the results that we produce. To say that you have no choice over your thoughts, well, that excludes the whole function of conscious mind thinking. Because the fact is, if I said think of a blue tree, you can choose to think of a blue tree or you can choose not to think of a blue tree. If there's lousy thoughts in my mind, then I'm in charge of them. The fact is, we're in charge of our mind and therefore in charge of the kind of results that we produce through our thinking. And of course, that's what we discussed during the NLP communication model. Next, we've got people have all the resources they need to succeed and to achieve the desired outcomes. So there's no unresourceful people, only unresourceful states. People have the ability to succeed, and there's no unresourceful people, just unresourceful states. See, we have the ability to succeed, and we have all the resources that we need. It just means that sometimes we need to get in touch with those resources, or sometimes we might need to learn a few additional skills. All that we need to do is either to add the resources necessary or to allow them to be able to get rid of whatever prevents them from not being able to achieve it. And that's a really useful belief to have. It means that there's no limitation in regards to what a person can achieve or what a person can even learn. You see, we are learning machines. It might just be that the person is using a unuseful learning strategy. You see, everybody has the ability to learn. If we were to take a rat and put a rat in an enriched environment, then in 45 minutes that rat's brain would actually, the weight would change, it would become heavier. So enriched environment simply means an environment where the rat would need to learn something. Now as a human brain, that will change in moments. And so when they cut open Einstein's brain, they looked at it and they said, oh, but this guy's brain is heavier. He had so much grey matter that his brain is heavier than the normal person. So the question is, was Einstein's brain heavier and that allowed him to think the thoughts that he did? Or was it because of the thoughts that he was thinking that his brain was heavier? In NLP, of course, we believe that the brain is used and the use of the brain will increase the brain weight. So we believe that people have all the resources that they need to succeed and to produce the kind of results that they want to produce and get the outcomes that they want. Number 10, all procedures should increase wholeness. So if we're going to do any kind of intervention, then that needs to create wholeness. Because we already think, people already are too fragmented. Look at parts integration as an example, where we have this internal conflict. On the one hand, I want to do this. On the other hand, I want to do that. And so with this conflict, it draws energy, and people already have so much internal conflict. So what we want to do is we want to increase wholeness, because of course wholeness is much better than fragmentation. Next, we've got there's only feedback, there's no failure. So we should always welcome feedback, because it's what's going to allow us to improve our behavior and get better and better. So if something's not working, don't see it as failure, see it as an opportunity to learn. If everything that happens is only feedback and we are a learning machine, then I'm going to improve my behavior so I can create the kind of results that I want. If you're communicating with somebody and you're not getting the response that you want, what do? Change your communication. So there's no failure, only feedback. And speaking of communication, the meaning of your communication is the response that you get. So when you're communicating with somebody and they're communicating with you, how much of that communication do you think you're responsible for? If you say you're only responsible for 50% of your communication, you're leaving 50% of that communication on the table. And this is where very often people can have misunderstandings. So it's really important to take 100% responsibility for that communication to create the results that we want. Have you ever heard people having a conversation and maybe one person doesn't understand and then the other person starts to speak even louder, saying the same thing? And it's almost as if they think that by speaking louder, that suddenly that's going to help the other person understand. And of course, we know that that doesn't. So accept the feedback. Look at how you can change your communication. William James said around 1890, he said the great discovery of our age will be that a person can change his thinking inside of himself and therefore change the world around him. So the question is, how do you make a change inside of yourself so that it can make a difference in the relationship outside of you? How would you be able to change inside of you? What kind of things could you change inside of you so that you could make a change that would reflect in people around you or outside of you? If the communication that you're communicating isn't getting a response that you want, then change that communication. If you had unlimited choice of behaviors and all the time to think about it, then I'm pretty sure you'd be able to get the response that you want. In fact, that's one of the things that we discuss in mindfulness. You see, very often people are reacting to things that are going on rather than responding. And so taking that time and thinking, well, how do I need to communicate differently? And then giving a response that's adequate as opposed to reacting, example, shouting or starting to speak louder. The next presupposition is the law of requisite variety. So the system or the person with the most flexibility of behavior will control the system. And again, if we just consider what we said with the meaning of communication is the response that you get. If something is not working, do it in a different way. It's really important to have that kind of flexibility that will allow you to be able to respond to the client's needs and change the client in terms of producing the kind of results that the client wants. In fact, Milton Erickson, he said that his best hypnosis subject became his best subject after 300 repeated inductions. I mean, can you imagine that? 300 repeated inductions? That is a lot of variety, a lot of different ways of doing something. Well, if we strive to have greater flexibility, then our results will get better. Just think about it. Who do you think are the most flexible people on earth? Of course, our kids. Why? Well, they can create such a range of behaviors. I don't know if you've ever noticed, you go into the shops and maybe a child doesn't get what they want, and you see these parents with the children, and the child is either screaming or crying or laying on the floor and throwing a tantrum. They've got so many different ways of doing. They ask mommy, and then they would ask daddy, and then they'd ask mommy, and then they start crying. And then they say, but you don't love me. So they've got so many different ways of doing something. So law of requisite variety is about learning a range of behaviors so that we can be adaptable to get what we want. Then lastly, all procedures should be designed to increase choice. And this just means that if a client comes to you and wants to change something, then we don't want to limit their behavior. We want to do something where the client has extra choice, a choice of doing something differently. We want to give them additional skills and additional options. And we'll talk more about that. So that's the presuppositions of NLP. In the next section, we will talk about some of the prime directives of the unconscious mind. Okay, so welcome back, and let's talk about cause and effect. And so let me ask you, which side of the equation are you on? Are you at cause for everything in your life, or are you at the effect of things happening to you? Mark Twain said, 20 years from now, you'll be more disappointed by the things you didn't do than by the ones you did do. So throw off the bowlines, sail away from the safe harbor, catch the trade winds in your sails, explore and dream. You see, no matter where we are in our lives or our careers, we either have the results that we want, or we have the reasons as to why we've not achieved the things that we want to achieve. The fact is that most people will give you reasons for not yet having achieved what they want. Reasons why they've not been on a holiday in the last 5 years. Whether it's a bad economy, being laid off, illness, or whatever is going on in their life. These are simply just reasons for why they're not satisfied in the area of being, or reasons for not being the way that they want things to be. Now, imagine that you knew the day where you're going to move on from this life. Imagine lying down 5 minutes before it was time to pass on, and you think to yourself, I would have, I could have, I should have. How many people do you know that have uttered those words or something similar? I could have been a contender, they say. But that thing happened to me, or that ruined my life. You see, those are simply just reasons for not having it all. Now, very importantly, I want to be very clear at this point and say that this doesn't mean that the person is to blame or that they're at fault. Please bear that in mind. The idea of finding the reasons is not to say that you or your client is at fault or to blame. It's not about beating yourself up. Now, as we imagine that moment before passing on, and you think about the things that you've not achieved and the reasons for not doing so, I'm sure you'll agree that that's probably not very satisfying, and it's going to be pretty disempowering. In fact, you could almost feel like you were cheated. Now, I appreciate that there's no evidence to say that you're totally responsible for whatever happens in your life, and that, you aren't always at total cause for everything in our lives. I do, however, suggest that in many cases, having a good plan and implementing that plan by taking the right actions, that results can be achieved. Furthermore, any feedback and learnings that we get from not achieving our intended goal simply serves to empower us and helps us to hone that action plan into one that's actually going to lead us to the success that we want. Thomas Edison famously replied that he didn't fail 10,000 times, but rather found 10,000 ways not to do it when he was asked about all his previous failures in creating the light bulb. Now, in many cases, people will actually blame everything and everybody around them as to why they've not succeeded. Many people are professional victims, and they love to play the blame or the victimhood game. Having these reasons for not having achieved the goal, well, it's not all bad. It's merely a case of perception. Once we understand what these reasons are, we can then change our focus and create a proper action plan to achieve what we want and what we desire. And this can be achieved by coaching and helping your client to overcome or navigate the stumbling blocks on that path to success. As William Jennings Bryan said, he said, destiny is not a matter of chance, it's a matter of choice. It's not something to be waited for, but rather something to be achieved. And so, let's just focus on the cause side of the dichotomy. Let's pretend that we were at cause for wherever we are in our life. Now, you may argue and say something like, well, I didn't ask for the car accident, and I didn't ask to be shot, or whatever bad thing could have happened in our lives. I'm only asking you to imagine that we were at cause for everything that's happened and wherever we are in our lives, and that the rest are merely just reasons for not having it. The fact is that we are where we are based on our conscious and our unconscious decisions that led us up to this point. Here's an example. Let's imagine a client was involved in a bank robbery and they were held up at armed gunpoint, and now they suffer with PTSD. Now, I know it sounds a little bit extreme, this, and I can assure you I've worked with much worse things with my clients. The fact is that the client was at that particular bank at that particular time based on their conscious and unconscious decisions. Please remember, like I said before, it's not about blame and it's not about fault. It merely points out that we are where we are based on our conscious and unconscious decisions. And this is one of the fundamental things that I talk to my clients about, because what this is going to give us, it helps us to get rid of all the reasons for not having what we want, and helps us to be empowered so that we can create the results that we want. Now we can take the learnings from the experience to help us in the future. I realize this is quite uncomfortable for some people to accept. Again, there's no evidence to suggest that we're always in control of what happens. But what it does do, it frees us up from the blame and the victimhood mentality to focus on what it is that we truly want. And this is a much more empowering position to be in, and a springboard to achieve the results that we want. When something's not working, we can change our course of action. As Albert Einstein said, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. So let's see what's working, what's not working. If it's not working, and we have reasons for things not working, let's learn from those reasons, and let's accept cause and create the results that we want, leading to empowerment. Right, so that's cause and effect, and in the next section we'll be looking at the NLP communication model. Welcome back, and in this section let's talk about the 5 principles of success. In NLP we use many different techniques to help our clients achieve the goals that they want. And when it comes to success, we incorporate the 5 principles of success. To achieve our desired outcome, there are 5 simple steps to help us achieve what we've set out to do, or to take control of our situation. They're quite simple in their own right, and yet very powerful when combined. And so the first is to know your outcome. You need to really know what it is that you want to achieve, or where you want to go, or what you want your outcome to be. Many people are totally lost, like sailing ships in a thick fog, because they're looking for something, but not quite sure what. Should I change my career? Must I stay with the person that I'm with? What do you really want? Make a list of the specific things that you want to achieve. Be sure to write them down, and write down exactly what it is that you want and not what you don't want. Then, of course, once we know what the outcome is, what we want to achieve, then we need to take action. And in fact, we need to take massive action. It's quite simple, yet so many people sit around and they ponder about what they should be doing next, never actually doing what it takes to get where they want to be. If you want to change your career, take action. You need to start looking for another job. If you want to save the relationship with Ian, take action. Why is it not going the way you want it to go? Speak to your partner and find out what he or she wants. Sitting around on your bum and not taking action is not going to get you anywhere. That is how people wake up and they realize their lives have passed them by. It's when they say, should have, could have, would have. So we need to take that massive action. The third thing then is to have sensory acuity. And so this is interesting in the fact that we're sometimes oblivious to what's going on around us. Example, what signals are we getting from other people? Let's stick with the idea of the relationship just for a second and really simplify it just for explaining what we mean by sensory acuity. If you lean in closer to give your partner a kiss and they turn their head so that you kiss their cheek instead, or they get red in the face, then there's probably something wrong. Ask them what the problem is. If it's been going on for some time, there may be some underlying issues, and maybe why you get this feeling that all is not well. If they jump up and they give you a more passionate kiss, then it's a good indication that you're getting what you want. So be aware of the subtle signals that people give us to show their emotions. So if you're taking action to achieve a particular goal and things are not quite going to plan, then it's important to notice that it's not going to plan, and of course then have behavioral flexibility. Now in this instance, I'm talking about sensory acuity specific in looking or noticing within a person, but we can have sensory acuity in noticing anything that we do. Is it working or not? And of course that leads us then to step number 4, which is to have behavioral flexibility. So let's say that there you are in a restaurant and your waiter brings you some food. Problem is that the food is cold. So what do? A, you moan at the waiter and make a bit of a scene. Your partner's embarrassed, and later you'll argue about your behavior. The waiter's already having a bad evening because the warmer drawer is playing up, and that's the reason why the food's is cold. Or B, now let's just say you quietly and politely call the waiter over and explain that the food is cold. He profusely apologizes and explains about the warmer drawer. He's actually also the manager, and he says you can have the meal on the house because of your politeness. You see, the way in which we act determine how other people again will react, and so on. The same situation can have many outcomes depending on your behavior. Back to the relationship example. Shouting back at your partner instead of asking them why they're in a bad mood can lead to further argument. Speaking to them in a soft, caring, calm voice could calm them down and give them time to explain, and maybe they just had a terrible day at work. So if something isn't working, do it differently. Look for alternatives. So have this behavioral flexibility, and as you do, you want to operate from a physiology and psychology of excellence. So what do we mean by that? Well, how do you stand? How do you carry yourself? The thoughts that run through your mind and how you act. Make sure what it is that you want in your head and how you want to carry yourself to achieve your outcome. Is it conducive to getting you the results that you want? Would you go to an interview in ripped jeans, chewing gum, and act in a way that may offend the potential employer? Do you walk tall and speak clearly? When you're with your partner, do you lie on the couch and shout across at the room for them to get you another cup of coffee? You don't see the Queen of England swearing in public and chewing gum with her mouth open. Instead, you will see a polite wave and a smile. So be sure that you act, behave, and carry yourself in a way that's conducive for the end result you wish to achieve. This doesn't mean being false. It simply means that you act in a way that will do you proud, because you never know who's watching. And so these are the 5 principles of success, with some simple examples just showing, how we as people can behave, and that there can be different outcomes depending on the behavior or lack of behavior. So when we incorporate these 5 principles of success, then we behave in a way that will help us at achieving our intended goal. Henry Ford said, whether you think you can or you think you can't, either way you're right. And Michael Caine once said, I have a policy to never listen to anyone explain why they can't do something. He said he didn't want to become convinced by them. And so when we have this goal or this outcome that we want to achieve, you see, we can be like a light bulb and we can be all over the place. Instead, if I take that energy from that light bulb and I focus it like a laser, then I can take massive action in focusing to achieve the particular outcome that I want to achieve, following these 5 principles of success. Good, so that's the 5 principles of success, and in the next section we're going to be talking about Wheel of Life. Okay, welcome back. Let's talk about responsibility for creating value and change. It's interesting how many times people go to trainings and, they take the most awesome notes. They make color charts, they underline keywords, they draw mind maps, and, they create notes that any PhD would be proud of. Then when they get back home, they take those beautiful notes and they put them there on that dusty note shelf, next to all the other notes that they took of courses gone by. Courses where they had every intention to take some form of action, but it seems that life just got in the way and things slipped. On the other hand, the next person who did the same course actually took those skills and learned and created wonderful change in their life. So, as you do this course and as you go through this training, consider this. Are you doing some self-help or are you doing some shelf-help? Let's look at somebody who buys a car. Two people living next door to each other can buy the exact same car. And one person, well, he drives his car every single day. Takes it camping, towing the boat, towing the jet skis, going on family holidays. Really getting so much value and use out of the car. While the neighbor only drives the car to church and back each Sunday, and then parks it up in the garage, and there it stands until the following week. 5 years later, when the day comes to trade in that car, the first person is all too happy to be buying a new car and is happy with the price. Whereas the second neighbor, well, he thinks about it and he thinks, why? The price and the size of the car, it's just not worth it. Now the car was exactly the same, and both people had the opportunity to create what they wanted with the car. But it comes down, it's our responsibility to create value, or similarly, to create change in our life. So if I was to say to you, close your eyes and relax the muscles around your eyes till they were so relaxed that you just couldn't relax them anymore. And then holding on to that relaxation, go ahead and test them and make sure that they just won't work. Then whose responsibility would it be to do those actions? Well, it would be the client's, isn't it? And this is the important thing to understand. And so it always boils down to the fact that it's our responsibility to create value or to create change with the resources that we have. And it's a very important consideration in creating value from anything that we learn or we do. You see, a product is merely a product. Whether you're buying a car or you're doing a course, it's only a product. It's what do you take away from it. When you say you're going to do and take certain actions to achieve your goals, then the goal is simply just a dream until you physically take those actions to go ahead and achieve them. So again, the question is, are you doing self-help or shelf-help? And I sincerely hope that you take responsibility and get wonderful value from doing this course. Now, by no means will you get all the value out of this than what you would do out of the live training, for sure, where we're spending 7 or more days together and learning a tremendous amount more. You're already taking this time to do that, investing your time, investing some effort, and I commend you for that. And I sincerely hope that you get the most out of this that you possibly can. So that's responsibility for creating value and change, and so I see you in the next section. Okay, welcome back, and in this session let's talk about observing other people and building sensory acuity. And so the basis of this is when the creators of NLP were modeling Milton Erickson, they realized that people actually make minute changes from moment to moment, and that we can notice those changes if we have enough sensory acuity. Now, these things here listed, these 5 things, are 5 easy ways of having sensory acuity and noticing these changes or these shifts in the person that we might be working with. Of course, there's lots of other things we can notice as well. But just let's focus on these 5 things for now. The first is skin color. Now, often people here think that it would have to do with white to red, as you might notice in somebody who's very fair-skinned. If they blushed, you would see a redness in the face. Well, imagine that, of course, we've got 7 billion people in the world, and so we've got people of various skin colors. And so somebody who is very dark-skinned, we wouldn't actually notice redness. So what happens when the blood vessels get filled up with blood? The pigment then changes, and so it becomes darker and not necessarily red. So we're looking for a light to dark. And we might notice this in the cheeks or the tips of the ears or the top of somebody's chest. And like I said, this is just one example of where you might be able to notice that there's a shift within the person. And within context, that may mean a particular thing. The second is skin tonus. And so the best way to think of this, if you could imagine splitting the face down the middle, so you've got the left and the right, that if they looked exactly the same, the left and the right hand side looked the same, then that is symmetrical. If the left and the right side didn't look the same, then that's not symmetrical or asymmetrical. So if you ever saw any of the Rocky movies, Sylvester Stallone is quite famous for maybe the left hand side and the right hand side of his lips not being symmetrical. So like I said, in one of the Rocky movies, and he's shouting, "Adrian, Adrian," and we can see a distinct asymmetry between the left and the right hand side of the face. Of course, with breathing, we can look for location as well as rate. So the client might be breathing high up in their chest, and the breathing moves and changes and goes either to the middle of the chest or down to the tummy, or vice versa. And similarly, of course, also the rate of breathing. So somebody who just before they're going to run a race compared to after they ran the race, of course there would be a distinct difference in their breathing. If you start talking to somebody and maybe they get a little bit upset, maybe their breathing increases. We're not saying what the change means, we're just saying within context it may mean a certain thing. Next, we've got lower lip size. And for lower lip size, we not so much noticing that the lip is getting any fatter. What we're noticing is actually that the lines in the lips get diminished or disappear. So as the blood vessels get filled with blood, so of course the lines may disappear. So similar to if you took a balloon out of a packet. Before you blow it up, it might be creased and you see little lines in it. And then as you blow air into it, then it stretches out. And that's what you might notice with the lips, that the lines disappear. Next, we've got the eyes. And with the eyes, we can notice, are the eyes focused or defocused? Are the pupils dilated or undilated? You've noticed that if you look at somebody and there's a lack of light, then the pupils will be bigger. Then if you switch the light on, then the pupils will contract a bit and get smaller. In fact, you could do that for yourself. Look in a mirror, turn the light on, turn the light off. Notice how the pupils contract to let in less or more light. Now these are just 5 simple things. And as I said, you can notice whatever you notice. In fact, they asked Milton Erickson one day, they said, "Dr. Erickson, how did you know that lady went into trance?" And he said, "I noticed because the pulse on her left ankle slowed down." Wow, well that's wonderful sensory acuity. And these 5 things are certainly 5 easy things for you to start practicing with. And you can do this as an exercise. Team up with somebody, whether it be a friend, a family member, or somebody at work, and get a baseline for what they look like. Then ask them to think of somebody that they really like and notice whatever shifts you notice. Then you want to do a break state, so get them to think of something totally different. Then ask them of somebody that they really disliked. Again, do a break state, so getting them to think of something totally different. and then have them think of either the person they liked or disliked without telling you whom it is. And then you go ahead and notice if you can find out whether it is the person that they like or dislike based on the shifts that you see within them. As an example, if we looked at Steve Irwin here, that might be our normal baseline, and then something happens. Now, we're not saying what it is, but something has happened, and of course there's a shift in the client. So notice the eyes, the lips, the jaws, whatever it is that you notice that indicates that there was a shift within the client. Good. So that's observing other people and learning how to start practicing your sensory acuity. And in the next session, we'll talk about rapport. Okay, so welcome back, and in this section we're going to talk about time management. You see, often people say that they just don't have enough time to work towards their goals. Of course, we all have busy lives, trying to fit in work and playing taxi to the children and every other little thing that you need to do. There's always something that gets in that way of me time. Well, if you consider that Richard Branson has the same amount of time in a day as every one of us, then how is it that he can achieve so much more in the same amount of time? He owns over 400 companies, and there are other people that own many more companies than him, and still they only have 24 hours. When we're strict with our time and realize where it is that we spend it, then it's a lot easier to manage it and to get the most out of it. It might not surprise you to know that most people spend around 4 hours a day watching TV. Now that actually equates to 9 years of your life in front of the box. Now I'm not saying that you need to stop watching TV. This is simply a tool to measure where your time is being spent. You will then be able to determine how and where you can free up some time to do the things that you really want or need to do. You can add whatever other activities you want to on this sheet as well. Maybe you spend your time doing something differently. And of course also the activities that you do might be different from day to day as well. The fact is, when we tally up all the hours that we spend every day on each activity, then we should get to 24 hours. So if you look at the time management sheet in your manual, then you'll see there's 2 columns for currently and in the future. In the first column, under how many hours spent each day, you've got how many hours do you spend sleeping, cooking, family time, etc. So you can write down currently how much time do you spend on that, and in the future how much time do you spend on that. And so then you can actually take out and see where you might be able to save some hours. So let's say you were watching 4 hours TV a day and you need to save 2 hours so that you could go to the gym. You could hypothetically just change your 4 hours from currently watching TV to in the future watching 2 hours worth of TV, which will then free up the 2 hours to go to gym. So this is just one time management tool. In fact, during the training, I'll show you at least 3 time management tools and things that you can do to free up your time to be able to focus on that thing that it is that you actually want to do. So ask yourself, what is it you want to free up time for? What is it that you really need to do or want to do? Whether that be read a book, go to the gym, create some time in the day so that you can cook for yourself, whatever that might be. So that's it for time management, and in the next section we're going to talk about anxiety.